Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call a meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just make a note. Kevin's gone tonight.
Yes.
Item number 1 is approval of minutes. The regular meeting minutes of June 15, 2023 were provided for review. I need a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of June 15, 2023 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mr. Studnicka?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Motion passed. Audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Rob, please come up.
Good evening. Rob Gaskell on Cottonwood Drive here in Lansing in Fire District Number 1. And
Michael Stackhouse, Fire Chief, Fire District 1, 195th Street in the county.
so I know you folks have a full schedule tonight. We'll keep this pretty short. I want to talk for just a few minutes about readiness. How do we know something will work when we need it? And when I thought about this, I thought about a match, looking at it. How do we know it's going to work? We can strike it and then it works, but of course, it doesn't do us any good after that point. So that's also a terrible analogy for firefighting. So consider a fire extinguisher. It stares very blankly back at you. It might have a little idiot gauge on the front of it, but how do we know it's going to work? Of course, we could pull the pin, squeeze the handle. If something comes out, it probably is going to work, but then that fire extinguisher isn't very valuable to us. So in the same way, how do we know a fire department, a fire district, and more broadly and importantly, the systems that are charged with fire suppression in the community, how do we know they're going to work? We could follow what was done on this day in history, 80 BC, when Roman General Marcus Crassus created the first Roman fire brigade. Of course, it's probably not a good model either, because that brigade set some of the fires that they went out and extorted money from the business owners of the property and in order to put that fire out. So we have something more modern. It's called ISO. And when I say ISO, you might be tempted to think, if you're in business or government, about the International Organization for Standardization in Geneva. They publish standards like the famous ISO 9001. If you're a photographer, ISO might remind you of the light settings for your camera. And if you're a young cell phone texter, ISO might be in search of. But for us, it stands for the Insurance Services Office. It's a subsidiary of Verisk Analytics, and it's headquartered in Jersey City, New Jersey. And their sole purpose is to collect information and analyze it to come up with useful metrics for property and casualty risk. It was born out of need. About 100 years ago, there was a series of fires in urban United States that were very, very destructive, and the insurance underwriters, after those fires, wanted to figure out a way to reliably assess the quality of municipal fire protection. So the big finding that they came up with is that there's a direct correlation between a community's investment in fire mitigation and a reduction in future fire losses. So that's kind of intuitive, but then again, when you're spending taxpayer dollars, being intuitive often is not the best approach. So who uses information that comes out of ISO? Well, two main categories. One, the fire services, public officials, folks who want to plan and budget and justify improvements, but also insurance companies. Their job is to help establish fair premiums, determine deductibles, decide how and even whether to write new business based on loss experience. And here you can think California, where insurance companies are actively pulling out of the state because of loss experience. So the ISO folks have created something called the PPC, the Public Protection Classification. And its purpose is to help communities prepare to fight fires effectively. And it's quite simply a score, a PPC class of 1 through 10. Lower is better, And here I'll point out that ISO and PPC are used interchangeably. So you can have an ISO score of or a PPC score of. It's the
What does
same.
PPC stand for?
It stands for Public Protection Classification. And in a few minutes, I'll ask the chief to come up and talk about the PPCs or the ISO classes for Fire District 1 and the City of Lansing. So what happens is that field representatives from the ISO organization come to a community periodically. They conduct an evaluation. It's very detailed, it's very categorized, and then they determine a PPC class for the community. Four main categories: emergency communication systems, so think dispatch, the fire department, obviously, the water supply, which is a very important piece of this, and finally, community risk reduction. And that's a little bit of a catch-all, but it's also very, very critical. Think the fire prevention codes, whether they are adopted or not, and how well they're enforced. If an organization, if a community such as ours were to receive a lower rating a poorer rating, remember low score is better, a poorer rating from one evaluation period to another, the ISO folks don't automatically report that to an insurance company. It's about a 6-month grace period for the community to make some changes if they wish. And ISO recognizes that sometimes communities don't want to make a change. Why? Because it might cost too much. It might represent a rural part of a community that nobody lives. Any of a number of reasons why you might not want to make a change in a worse score. So, what kind of distribution of classes do we have in both the U.S. and Kansas? In the U.S., the median or middle score is a 5. That's the most common. 4 and 6, either side of the 5, are next most, along with 10. 10 happens to represent, again, the worst classification you can have. 1 and 2 are rare, and in Kansas, 6 is the most common, followed by 5 and 7 and 9. 9 is the best possible class when there's no identifiable public fire protection water supply. And split grades are okay. You'll hear that in a second from the chief. We have that in Fire District number 1. I want to point out that ISO class is not a means for designing and operating a fire department. Rather, it's a way of measuring the results of fire suppression systems relevant to a community. The standards for designing and operating a fire department come from the National Fire Protection Association, based on fire science and empirical history of firefighting. So I'm going to ask the chief to come on up and bring it home and talk about the ISO classes for here.
Council Mayor, thank you for listening to me. I'm going to bring it down to a local level. So ISO, the PPC score and the ISO rating, same thing. It's just a different vocabulary. City of Lansing is an ISO rating of 3. Our townships, High Prairie and Delaware, make up 5 and 10, depending upon how close the residences are to the firehouse, a 5-mile radius. And if you follow along on the sheet I gave you, so emergency communications, which is dispatch center, makes up 10% of the total classification. There's pretty much 0 that Fire District 1 as a fire service can do to persuade that number in any way. The next section is the water supply. 2 of those categories, the credit for supply system and the hydrant size, that's strictly the water company. But you'll notice the inspection and flow testing. We constantly flow test, inspect hydrants, do a bulk percentage of them annually, and get through all of them, within 3 to 4 years. And you'll notice that that score is a 7, as much as we can get, and that's due to our inspections and flow testing. Next is fire department scoring, which is all about us and our capabilities. First section, engine companies. So that's the ability to have 2 engine companies respond on a first alarm basis to a structure fire. Engine company is made up of 3 personnel minimum. NFPA 1710 calls for 4 personnel, which ISO pulls its information from, or its benchmarks. We scored a 5.99 out of 6 possible, so that's a relatively good score. Reserve pumpers, you'll notice we scored a 0. We have pumpers at Fire District 1, but we did not have any that were classified as reserve. We do now have a designated reserve apparatus, so the future scoring that would go up to a 0.5. Pump capacity, that basically means that our pumpers, our engines, provide the minimum required gallons per minute, and we have the necessary equipment on the pumper. And you'll see that's 3 out of 3. Next category is ladder service. 4 points possible. We scored a 1.11. We do not have an aerial device. There are several benchmarks for requiring an aerial device within 2.5 miles of any structure that's 3 stories or above. 3,500 gallons per minute required fire flow to put out the fire. We do, as mentioned before, now have an auto aid agreement with Leavenworth City, which helps us out. Unfortunately, the distance does not help with the ISO rating. Reserve ladder, that's a 0, obviously, and we don't have a ladder, so we wouldn't have a reserve ladder. Deployment analysis, possible 10 points. We scored a 2.65. That's basically putting the district in perspective. You're supposed to have a firehouse within an urbanized area within 1.5 miles of any point within an urbanized area, and then a ladder truck within any 2.5 miles. So there's some work to be done there. The future depends on population growth, money, etc. Personnel, you'll see 15 points possible. We scored a 5.19. I will say that these shaded areas on your sheet, there are areas that we scored lower in that can or have the potential to move up or down any direction depending upon the resources that we have. Personnel is based upon providing that 2-out engine with 3 personnel or 4 minimum staffing, having 2 engines out first due, and auto aid is included on those numbers, but you can only be credited for 1 point with the auto aid. That's an area that we're struggling with, and I think everybody across the nation fire service is, so that number has the potential to go either way. Training, possible 9 points. FD1 scored 6.44. One thing that we've done is specifically target the ISO categories to make sure that we're fulfilling all categories. Required 2 hours of shift training now on top of our Thursday night training, so that number should go up a lot. And then operational considerations, you'll see we scored a 2 out of 2 on that, and that's basically just that we have standard operating procedures and follow the incident management system. And then community risk reduction is added on top of that. We scored a 4.5 out of 5.5. And that's basically training, having inspectors, investigators, and fire safety programs in place and following SOGs, SOPs. And then our divergence reduction, that's an automatic deduction figured by ISO between the water supply and the fire department. So they have a model figure that they plug in, and then you deduct the 1.41. So Fire District 1's overall score was 57.61 out of 105.5 possible. And then you look below. When I came on, the staffing levels was a chief, 3 captains, 7 career firefighters, 6 part-time, and 6 volunteer firefighters. Our current staffing, myself, 3 captains. We have 9 positions. We added positions, but we only have 7 filled. 2 part-time and 10 volunteers. And I will say that the beginning numbers were on paper. You know, we had volunteers on a roster, but having a roster and having people show up to fires are 2 different things. So that's all I have, and thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Thanks, Rob. Okay, presentations, new business. Item number 2 is the Aquatic Center site location. Jeff Barkley, Water's Edge Aquatic Design, will brief the council on the progress of the 2 site options. A decision on the location will need to be made in order to start the more detailed design work. Jason?
I don't have much to add to that. We have 2 members of our design and consultant team here. We have Ben Gasper from SMH and Jeff Bartley from Water's Edge, and we'll turn it over to Jeff.
See a lot of the committee members out here as well.
A lot of the committee members are here.
Mayor, council members, good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm here to present an update on the Aquatic Center, and I'm representing the work of design team. As Jason mentioned, that includes your city staff, Ben Gasper with SMH Engineering, and we have members of the Aquatics Committee. So if you don't mind, if you would stand if you're on the Aquatics Committee. These are some of the members who are able to come tonight. So with that, we have some information that we can share with you and have one ask related to the site location. So with that, we have, working with staff and with Ben and sharing these thoughts and ideas with your committee, we developed options for the site, and we ended up with two options for developing the site. Of course, the site, again, is Bittersweet and Mary Streets, just west of the elementary school. And we were looking at, and I believe this we presented last time with you, we were looking at two possible options for developing the site. One is on the west side of the property, the other is on the east. The overall property, I believe, was about 17 acres, so the site's larger than what we would need for the aquatic center. So there are options to develop that. Here are a couple of overhead shots, drone shots. This one is the east side of the site at the corner with the elementary school here. This is Bittersweet Street and Mary running east-west. And then this is a shot looking at the west side. And you can see throughout the property it's fairly heavily wooded, and there's a fair amount of topography associated with it. Here is a kind of analysis map that we created to help understand what the site looks like. And the site itself actually is somewhat divided into an east-west by some of the natural boundaries or barriers. You can see the light blue area I've highlighted. Those include storm drainage channels that are within the site. And then we have on the north side, it's bound by the 7 Mile Creek. And with 7 Mile Creek comes a significant amount of floodplain and some floodway areas. And that floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, stretches down. It's a little hard to see on this, but there's a shaded area where that floodplain stretches down into that spot. So in that site, on the west side, it's a fairly mild slope, like the grade is much milder. It's about 2.5% grade. And then on the east side, there's a significant drop. I've drawn in this as dark red line. That shows a significant drop in grade or embankments as the site drops from the west side to the east, drops down into the hole, and then it flattens out again. But this area is located in a pretty low area. The street that runs along it, it actually climbs in grade. And interestingly enough, I know one of the, I apologize for not remembering who, but one of the council members was interested in looking at the east site, perhaps to make it more visible with the intersection and the adjacent grade school. One of the interesting things is there's a lot of fall from that intersection down to actually where the site flattens out. It's about 20 feet drop in grade on that intersection. Along with that, there is an easement that follows along the street where the utilities currently run, and that includes all the utilities you need, sanitary sewer, electricity, and water. And then dialing in a little closer, this is again, east location. As I mentioned, this is a ground shot we're looking east along Mary Street. It's a little bit hard to see, but you start to see where the grade drops off considerably once you get off the street. And then it's a little bit hard to see, but this area is basically where the grade really drops down into the hole in that spot. And then on the west side, these are some shots for that. There's an existing curb cut along Mary Street, and you can see where the grade is a little bit milder slope. Still quite a bit of trees and vegetation in the area, though. So we have two options developing the site, the east and the west side. And these are the two that we brought forward that we thought were most relevant of probably 5 or 6 options that we created as a team. And we are, just up front with you, we are recommending the west location for various reasons, and that includes recommendations from the design team. I believe it's also a recommendation from staff independently, and the committee has seen these, and the committee also likes the west location compared to the east side. But this is the western plan. In that clearing, this is where we'd like to put the aquatic center. Push it farther to the west side of the site, but still leave some room, some buffer from the property line, which is located here, and then place the parking lot more in the central portion of the site, which then allows the parking lot to serve other parts. If you continue to develop the park, whether it's walking trails or those kind of things, parking lot can serve that. The parking lot could actually push into the floodplain as well if needed, and it's something that can be built in the floodplain versus, say, like buildings or the aquatic center are not structures that you would want to necessarily build in the floodplain without a significant amount of redevelopment or filling of the grade or permitting.
So nothing's in the floodplain right now.
So nothing is in the floodplain except for we're just barely kind of touching it on that corner. So again, and we placed everything pretty visible. I know the one intent was to make it as visible as possible from this intersection, but as you drive heading west from the street, your actually grade is falling, so you can see across the site here. And so we're trying to place in this plan, the concept, the pool, aquatic center, close to the street where it's more visible, and even have placed the water slide tower structure up closer to the street, so it helps advertise the aquatic center for those who drive by. And then the parking lot, we would, rather than connect to the existing curb cut, we would connect in a new location. And we have a parking lot right now for about approximately 140 parking stalls, which is what we think is appropriate for the size aquatic center. A couple other things, the grade falls from west to east. Something that Ben had pointed out is that there's an advantage that if we place the aquatic center on the higher portion of the grade, we're actually excavating, building the aquatic center structures within the existing subgrade. And then if we're doing filling, we're actually filling the parking lot rather than the swimming pool or building structure, which is a better, safer way to build those structures. So I think that's what I have on that. Ben had put together some costs to compare the site development for the two locations, and I believe the cost for this one is about $725,000 for site work, including the clearing, earthwork, parking lot, etc., and that's prior to contractor markups or contingency. So anything you want to add on that, Ben?
So with this project, you would leave all the trees and everything from like the parking lot over to Bittersweet would just remain grown up? Or?
Everything, I'm sorry, so I'll leave these
The
trees.
parking lot to Bittersweet, it would just remain trees and foliage and stuff?
Yes, yes, this area, there would be no reason to touch those trees.
Is there any difference in the size of the facility on the east side versus the west side?
No, what we tried to do is the exact same, say, aquatic center and parking lot. The graphics may show a little bit different, but the cost comparison are taking into account identical aquatic center and parking lot size.
And 140 slots is big enough.
Yes, that's what we're estimating. It's all estimating based on usage and capacity, but we're estimating in between a car for 3 visitors, 3 to 4 in that range.
Yeah, because I didn't understand how you come to that number. So
We're projecting, and I think we'd gone through some of this earlier. So right now at this size facility, we're in at roughly that kind of 450 to 500 person capacity, and at 3 to 4
people per
patrons
car.
per car, it's about 140 parking spots.
Thank you.
And that gives you, like I said, 450 to 500 capacity. Of course, that's just at one time. The daily capacity could be quite a bit more, as much as, say 1,000 guests in a single day. So,
Now, for that 700 plus thousand, what are we getting on this? I know the future green space, I assume there's nothing really there. You might thin it out a little bit, that's it.
that's correct.
And the walking trail is future, it's not included,
That's correct. It is not.
and there's no sidewalk going up Bitter Street included, right?
That is correct. It
So,
includes
we get-
primarily, this comparison includes primarily clearing and developing the aquatic center and the parking lot itself.
Okay, and that's all that's included in it.
Yeah, just the civil engineering part of it.
Okay.
I get
Yeah,
it, right?
just the site civil part, not actually the aquatic center itself. It will be everything around it.
Horizontal stuff.
Yep.
Nothing vertical.
Okay. Anything-
And there's a major difference between the cost of this one versus the west, for just the civil part.
Just the civil part.
Like
yeah.
double,
Yeah.
if I read it right.
There would be really, and that's where the cost difference would be. We wouldn't expect
1.4.
there to be a difference in, say, the cost of the aquatic center or the buildings. For each side, it is the developing the site and the parking lot.
So it doesn't have anything to do with utilities or access.
Utilities and access are all included in that that number. The biggest difference between the two sites would be on the east side. There's two large storm sewer structures. I think they're two about 72-inch pipes that would dump right into where the future facility would be. So we'd have to reroute all that storm water around it, which gets to be expensive.
So moving on into this one, and I think, my personal opinion is the reason why you would build this site is that if you wanted to save the west portion, which is a milder slope, if you wanted to save that for some future development or some future work, it's going to be easier to build that than, say, down in the hole. So you would take on the hardest part now and then save this for something that, entice something else to go into that spot. That would be
Any chance putting the aquatic center in a floodplain though?
Well, it would not be in the floodplain.
Okay.
And this plan, it would not be in the floodplain, but it would be, the challenge is, it is sitting at the outlet of a large storm pipe.
Right.
So there is, in the case of large storm, there would be a significant amount of stormwater coming out of this pipe that would need to be redirected around and managed.
Oh, yeah.
The parking lot in this location. So this gray area right in here is the extent of the floodplain. So it's mostly the aquatic center is not, but the parking lot would be. And we do that on occasion, build parking lots for aquatic centers in the floodplain, primarily because when it's raining, you have a storm, that you're certainly not using the aquatic center.
And also get massive runoff.
So the downside to it is, I guess the pros and cons of it. The con part is, unfortunately, we don't think you're getting the visibility that you'd hope for by placing it on the corner, since it's so far down, deep in the hole. And to put it in kind of relative context, the water slide that we'd be looking at, the platform that you would stand on is about 22 feet off the deck, and there's a 20-foot drop in grade. So if you were driving across here, you might be looking straight at the kids on the water slide tower, whereas you normally would be looking up at that structure. And then as you said, the reason not to do it is a significant higher cost. There are challenges to it, and we're to be honest with you, we're worried about cost, and we're trying to be cognizant of that and trying to make sure that you get good value for the aquatic center without going over budget, which is going to be an ongoing challenge as we move forward.
How about time-wise, Jeff? I mean, does it take longer to do the civil work on that one than it does the other one, or no?
It probably, I would expect it would take, might take more work, earthwork to do it, but not significant enough to be a deciding factor between the two.
Well, I was going to say I would hesitate with that because one of the east option, since we are placing the pool in a hole, you have to bring in a lot more fill material, which you kind of have to let that settle before you dig that back out to build a pool in there. So it does take a little longer time to do that.
That is a good point. That the way to manage that, building a structures on fill, you're either letting it set for a while for it to experience its settlement or consolidation, or you're taking other measures to stabilize the subgrade or the fill so it does not settle.
Yeah. I heard delay, but okay.
Yeah. And then
With the west side, it's closer to Angel Falls Trail, so if kids are coming from like Adams Acres neighborhood, they can just take a shortcut through the Adams Falls Trail to get there, or if they live further east in Adams Acres, they can come down Bittersweet, so it creates multiple areas to get there.
Yeah, it's not a bad look.
we did
Either one's not.
we did walk the site. This the 7 Mile Creek is pretty impressive. The valley or ravine that it is, because we did look at where there are opportunities to perhaps bridge across it, and you can bridge across it, but it'd be a significant structure to do that. Yes. And again, this one's more expensive. I think we're at 1.3 million-ish compared to 725. So it's a good $600,000 difference in building it on the east versus the west.
All right, any more questions for Jeff?
I'd have a question with Tim. Looking at the payback, how long will be payback? How many years east versus west? Have you looked at that?
We didn't look at that, but I know one of the things we spoke about in our committee meetings is, we certainly get more bang for our buck to the west. If we're choosing that east option, which is $800,000 more, maybe that means we get one less water slide. Maybe that means we have less cubic footage in the pool. You know what I mean? We felt like there's so much more value on that west side that we'd be able to have more features for our residents. So, we didn't really look at the payback long term as much.
And refresh my memory, the sales tax is for 20 years?
Yes, 20 years. Yep.
And the money has to be used in this area on the sales tax. So once it's paid for, we can do some of these future improvements using that same sales tax?
I believe so. So if it was paid off in 15 years, I think the council at that time could say, hey, let's rescind the sales tax, or they could add additional features to that area. I think it would have to be recreation related and be in that area though. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Citizens Advisory Committee for all your work. Really appreciate it.
We do have the site was the main thing for the focus, but I do have an update of the pool concept if you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
And I'll go through quickly. And you don't have to stand if you want. Or actually, do we have?
It was in the packet.
Okay. So updating the concept plan. We've been working with, again, with the committee, going over the amenities and the features and what the pool design might be. So again, as a refresher, the pool is intended to have primary focus is open rec swimming. So you open the doors and the families, kids enjoy it for several hours during the day. But in addition to that, it's going to house a lot of programs, including water aerobics, lap swimming, swimming and dive teams, swim lessons, water walking, and then party rentals. we're looking, as we're developing the pool design, we're keeping track of what the community wants, what they've expressed that they want for aquatic center amenities. And this, on the left-hand side, these include the ranking or preferences from the online survey that the community has seen. And again, large water slides, sunshades, family slide, lazy river, zero depth entry, those were the more popular items. We did a exercise with the committee, and the committee was about 11 strong, I think, between staff and the aquatics committee. And I told them I thought these features were givens: splash pad, zero depth, shade, lap lanes, at least 6 lap lanes, open flume, water slide, and 1 meter diving. So if we said those were the basic foundation, what about these other features? And this is how they ranked. The lazy river current channel was ranked the highest, followed with this shallow water family slide, and then the other speed slides. So lazy river and water slides were very popular, and then followed with, there's been a pretty healthy discussion. Your aquatics committee includes 2 coaches, the coaches of the Lansing Sea Lions, and there's been a lot of discussions about the number of lanes, whether it's 6 lanes. We can house swim meets in 6 lanes, but certainly an 8-lane, 25-yard. Expanding the lap pool to a larger side is a benefit, but it does come at a cost. So we've had those discussions.
You said 25 meter in lieu of 25 yards. What's the
so the length? So there are a couple of questions. Right now, the concept shows 25-yard length. 25 meters is an option versus 25 yards, and then 8 lanes instead of 6 lanes. So we had the committee rank both of those choices.
Is most of the competitive swimming done in meters? I mean, I know Olympics.
It's I would say a lot of the competitive swimming is in 25 yards locally. It depends a lot on your other facilities, what their lengths are. The majority of them, I believe, are 25 yards. I believe 25 meters is from the swim coach's standpoint, is an advantage. To have a little bit longer length for the training for the kids, and be a different facility than, say, what the others are you're competing with. And then certainly 8 lanes over 6 lanes facilitates a larger group of kids for competition and swim meets.
What kind of cost differential is there from a 6-lane to 8-lane?
So really the preference, as coach has pointed out, is I think that the belief is 6-lane, 25 yards is the base option, and if we could afford the 8-lane option, it ought to be 8-lane, 25-meter option. So going from one to the next, and we've priced that out to be about we're adding 1,200 square foot of water to the overall facility from roughly 9,000 square foot. So that adds another $600,000 in cost. So it does add a significant amount of cost to it.
So just out of curiosity, if I can ask the committee, if we could afford 6 lanes at 25 meters, is that no? So it's either 6 lanes at 25 yards or 8 lanes at 25 meters.
My name's David Brusher.
David,
Yes, sir.
Can you explain why I'm having trouble understanding
Wait a minute.
yards to the meters?
About
He's got to answer Greg's
22,
question.
22 meters.
So 6 lanes at 25 yards or 8 lanes at 25 meters, but not 6 lanes at 25 meters.
The preference would be keeping it at yards, because most of the competition is in yards throughout the high school, college. When you go to a more year-round program, is done in yards. That's most of the competition. Once you start getting into more like the Olympic distances and stuff like that, then it is in meters. But if you want to talk about Olympic-sized pool, then we're talking 50 meters, so it's double the size. And I'm not talking with that, but if it's 8 lanes, 25 meters, it gives us the opportunity to host a meet during the summer that would attract some of those USA Swim clubs if we wanted them.
Okay.
But overall, I mean, 6 lanes, 25 yards, that's simply what the high school pool is like, what the Riverfront Community Center, what most of the high schools swim as yards.
Okay, good. Thank you. You answered my question.
You answered my question
Okay.
too. Thank you. Sorry, Greg, for interrupting you.
It's okay. We do that.
I just wanted to make sure.
But if I may,
Yeah, Marcus.
when we're not doing swim lanes, right? And it's 600, rough estimate, 600,000 is what you're saying to add 2 more lanes, correct? That gives us a much larger pool as we grow in the community. So it's not just about the swim lane, because we're not always doing swim lanes.
true.
Those lanes are not going to be there.
Right.
But that gives us much more of a pool. And if we're going to increase this community, therefore we're going to increase the number of users in the pool, I'd rather spend 600 now than have something so dang small that we just outgrew it. Now we're going to drop another 750,000 to design another bigger pool in the green space area, and we have 2 pools, one
Well,
for swim meets. And
There's more pool to the laps, though. I mean, if you look at the design, there's a lot of places to swim and
but
splash in the water.
I'm just saying, as we grow, we need to think about that, because that's not much to spend, to increase the size 1,200 or 1,500 to the pool. That's not much to spend, 600 grand, when we're talking a multi-million-dollar project here.
Get your checkbook out.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what point of view you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, you do the math.
If
Tim
you're a
will do it.
taxpayer, that
600,000
might be-
on a multi-million-dollar project is pennies on a dollar in the long run.
And you bring up a good point. One of the things that came up in that committee discussion too was, there's certain things that are easier to add after the fact. Adding 2 lanes after the fact would be pretty challenging. So
Yeah,
that's
you ain't gonna do
that was one of the things that the committee did discuss. But this is really good discussion. But so we don't need that decision tonight. But that's something that we can kind of dwell on, talk to our constituents, and gauge interest in that. But we don't need that 6-lane, 8-lane decision tonight.
All you need tonight is east or west.
Yeah, we're just.
Yes, so the east or west is the ask for tonight, and then we'll continue to develop the pool design or concept at the chosen location, and then we'll have another shot at discussing final amenities and final approval of what's going into it. But we would like feedback. I'm sharing this tonight so that we can get your initial thoughts and feedback as we kind of continue to develop. We're making sure that we're staying on track with what we should do.
I like the west location.
Okay, thanks.
Do we need a motion?
You want to?
No, I'll ask for a motion. You done, Jim?
I'm not done, but you can do
All
that
right.
if you want to do it now, and then we'll.
Yeah,
then we'll
no, just keep going.
Okay.
I mean,
well, I'll go quickly.
like
I know
that.
you have a full night, so what we'll do is go quickly. This is the pool design that we've developed with the committee. This is representative photo, similar type facility, and then we have working through it. We have 0 depth entry. So you come through the bathhouse. There's a parking lot on the west location to be located here. You come through the building, enter the building. We'll have shade, and we'll likely add more shade sprinkled around the site. We have the shallow 0 depth entry. Closest to the building, you'll walk in, and gradually the pool will get deeper. Each line is a 1 foot increment, and as you pass by, there's shade. Shade in the water itself, along with a bench, so parents with toddlers can sit there under the shade, and then we have a slide, smaller slide for the smaller ones in about 18-inch deep water.
Where's the splash pad?
Next slide. Oh,
it's right in the
yes.
bottom right.
So splash pad's down here. I'll show you that in a second. So as you get, then we have the lap lane area, and we're showing this is the 6-lane, 25-yard. The red dashed line represents what the 8-lane, 25-meter would look like, and that's what the pool would look like there in the area, in the lap lane area. This end of it's the deep water, so we are combining the lap lanes with the deep water and the shallow side with a 1-meter diving board on the end. Potentially a climbing wall, although the climbing wall is pretty low on everyone's priority so far. And then we have a water basketball goal and a volleyball net areas shown in there. Next slide, please. And then we have Lazy River. Lazy River's been extremely popular from the open swim, just recreation aspect, but also for the water walking programs. Extremely popular in a lot of facilities, and that's located in this location here. And right now it's a pretty good length at 190 feet, so it'll take a good minute and a half or so to up to a couple minutes to find your way around single loop. Okay, and then this shows. What's the next slide, please? And then the water slides. Water slides, in order to not take up pool space, we've set them adjacent to the pool with a run-out flume on those, which is this just flat run-out location here. And again, we placed it close to the street. And this is a pretty similar slide structure. It's about 22 feet from the walkway of the tower, and then you add another 10 feet, so it could stand a good 30 feet above the pool deck. So that's where you advertise your aquatic center to the public. And then adjacent to it, we're keeping the splash pad close by so that we can use the infrastructure, the filter plant, that for it. But it's certainly fenced or located that it could be open when the pool's not open, and open for a longer period of time. So I think that should be it. Next slide. So I think that is the concept.
Okay, any
So
more
far.
questions on the design?
What's the capacity difference between the 6 lane and the 8 lane?
I'm sorry.
Capacity?
Capacity, again, 450 to 500.
Is that based on
people.
6 lanes?
That is based on 6 lanes.
What
So that would
be the
increase from
capacity
there.
at 8?
That would add. So that would add it. It would be 5. That would add another 50 people or so to it. So 550 to 600, from 450
That's
to
all?
500.
It's
It's about 15 to 20 square foot per person.
Okay.
So,
And would that
and
parking
some of
lot-
that's diving, and some of that's shallow water.
Okay.
Then.
and
No, the current
one of the-
parking lot's built on B2 with the 6.
It is, and again, the parking lot, there's no hard fixed number
Right, you
for
could
that.
expand the parking lot if you had to get more spaces in there.
Yeah, I was just thinking the domino effect,
Right.
you add that, you have higher capacity.
Yeah, the estimate did not include the difference. I did not add parking to that.
Right.
Nor did I expand, say, the building or bathhouse, but it does come with all the pool structure and its larger filters and piping and dirt work, excavation, that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
And then, so Jason asked me to share a timeline on this. What we're working at the committee, and what we're tracking for is that we could have construction drawings done late this year or the very early beginning or early next year in order to bid it, and then just can start construction this upcoming spring and be ready for the following summer is the schedule. And then for us, next steps, again, the ask for tonight is the site location. Once we have that, we're going to continue to work on the plan. We're going to kind of validate the numbers. We'll develop the concept plan. I'd like to share the plan with contractors to kind of confirm budgeting that we're doing, and then we would start to prepare construction documents and be ready get ready for bidding.
Thank you.
When you say spring and then have it ready for the next summer, you're talking summer
Yes.
of 25.
Be opening for summer of 2025.
Okay, just want
Yes, not
spring to summer sounded great. Like, just get it done.
Yeah.
I know that wasn't what.
We're open it more
Some
open.
people will hear that and think 24. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. there's no more questions, I need a motion to approve concept B2, replacement of the aquatic center on the site.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. We already had discussion, so call roll.
Okay, Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mr. Stednica?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Motion passed, thanks, yeah. Okay, item number 3 is, thanks, gents, appreciate it. Update to housing analysis and assessment. Marty Schuckner, RDG Planning and Design, will be present to update the City Council on the progress of the housing analysis and assessment along with the results of the housing survey. So, Marty, you're on.
Okay, thanks. Well, this will not be nearly as much fun as water parks.
Hopefully not as long as it.
But you don't have to vote on anything, so it's, yeah. So, well, thanks for having me here. It's been a real pleasure to work on this project in Lansing and with Tim and staff and all of the people we've talked to. Famous last words is that I will try to be brief because I know you have a full agenda, but I will try to give you a taste of what's in the document. There's a lot of stuff here, and you'll be getting, as soon as we've made proofreading changes and so forth, you'll all be getting a copy of the full document. So the plan or the study includes 5 different chapters. We started out with, as we always do, with a community input process that involved really 2 elements. One is a series of conversations with key stakeholders, builders, developers, realtors, knowledgeable people in the industry. And that's a very interesting thing to do, as well as getting a chance to meet good people. We also did a community survey, which is very interesting. We had a response of about 157 people, which is about 2% of the non-prison population. So that's pretty good as well. So those things are all very useful. The second chapter is a snapshot of housing conditions, demographics, population, and so forth in the city, things that really are pertinent to the projections that we make in Chapter 3. So that provides what we see as the demand for housing, given certain assumptions, which may or may not be right, but they're things that we can defend, as well as price points. The 4th chapter are goals for strategic goals for a housing program in Lansing. The 5th chapter is the area where I stick my nose in places where it doesn't belong in terms of strategies and things that the community can do, we think, to meet its housing goals. So first of all, in the first chapter, a quick summary of the things that we learned from stakeholders, and they fall into 4 specific areas. Markets, and you can see on the board the markets that people see for Lansing, which are basically a little bit of everything. Independent living for older adults was something that people cited as being an interesting market. Moderately priced single family, entry-level single family, really kind of the same thing. Market rate rentals, and interestingly enough, move-up housing. So things that are above what the current market is serving right now. You'll see the reason for that in a few minutes. A bunch of obstacles that are not unique to Lansing, but they're things that we're experiencing in all of our work throughout the Midwest. It is expensive to develop lots, and that's a significant problem in Lansing because we have a real shortage of improved single-family lots right now. There have been projects in the area that have flopped, not necessarily in Lansing, but they sort of sour the market on a different part of the metropolitan area. We don't use incentives to a great degree. There's the old problem of NIMBYs, of people who oppose multifamily development, and sometimes with good reason, sometimes because it's different and people fear things that they're not familiar with. Construction costs are high. There are not that many builders involved in the area, And transportation, particularly transportation to I-70, was also cited as a significant problem. Opportunities. It's really can be a pain to, as people told us, as developers told us, to build in Johnson County. And so there's some interest in moving to another area where at least there's a perception of a more friendly development environment. New housing types that are needed, and this is something that I know we'll get into as we move through the presentation, the need for more rooftops. A big problem and something that we will cite throughout is that Lansing had a very bad decade in terms of housing production, really underperformed, and we've got to fix that. And things like the water park will help, but the water park and commercial development and so forth all need rooftops, all need people to support them, and we've got to figure out ways to make that happen. Finally, some observations. People look at Baser and wonder why aren't we doing that in terms of development. Well, we did between 2000 and 2010, but that momentum seemed to move to another city. Observations of many rental houses that are flipping, and I think you'll see some evidence of that too as we move through the presentation. So let's see, we'll figure out why this isn't. There we go. The survey. So the survey was primarily owner occupants. About 88% of the people who responded owned their own homes. Most lived in single family homes. People work in really all over the place, but the respondents tended to work in Lansing, although the census figures of workplace are a little bit different from that. We got pretty even responses proportionate to population from all sectors of the city. But it's important to note that we did not pick up very many people in the way of renters. And that is an important interest group that these kinds of studies almost never pick up unless it's a random survey. But what we did get are the opinions of people who were interested enough in housing to respond to the survey, and that's a very important group as well. Okay, let's see here. It's just a little slow on the trigger. Incomes. Lansing has a rather high median household income, almost $100,000, and it's probably over that by now. That ranks very high in terms of even the whole metropolitan Kansas City area. Just to give you an example of a comparison, Leawood, which most of us think of as being the real fancy district in Kansas City, is $156,000. And most parts of the metropolitan area are less than that. So we have generally a high-income population, and people are generally, as you can see on the bottom chart, paying between $1,000 and $2,000 a month for housing. There are reasons for that, but right now the values of the city and even the rents of the city are pretty affordable to the majority of people. You also see in the bottom figure 1.7 in the actual document, that there are a lot of people, 22%, who have paid off mortgages. That indicates, obviously, retirees and a senior market, and a senior market that might be interested in other settings. So a lot of the numbers indirectly sustain different kinds of market conclusions that, and these are all sort of symptoms of those things. Most of the people who responded are really quite happy with their housing situation. 80% satisfied, 20% not satisfied. Those are probably the redders. When asked if they weren't satisfied, when they weren't satisfied, they tended to say it's too expensive or I can't afford it. In the middle figure, we ask people what are the most important factors when choosing a house. There's a very strong sensitivity to cost. What are the biggest concerns regarding housing in Lansing? Taxes. So Surprise, surprise. Moving on to the amenities that that people like about Lansing, the top-rated items, the things that people rated as being either very satisfied or quite satisfied, were safety and security, schools, public services, and parks and recreation. The things that are lowest rated are the local tax rate. There's a little bit of a paradox there because those taxes are paying for the quality services that people like, but that's city government, isn't it? It's having been in it, that sort of runs with the territory. Other things that were seen as being big problems, the biggest one again being transportation. This related to the various things like lack of street continuity down to the number of stoplights on K7 getting to I-70, of these things that seem to put Lansing at something of a competitive disadvantage with Basel and with other competitive areas. This was an interesting one. It's kind of the one that we think can be extremely interesting in terms of what kinds of things are acceptable and what kinds of things we propose. In the survey, and if you took it, you might have seen this, we had an array of different kinds of housing types and asked people which of these would be preferable or appropriate in Lansing. Not too surprisingly, the top-rated one were conventional three-bedroom houses, because that's basically what people in this survey live in. But there's also some tolerance for other things as well, and I think that that's interesting as markets nationally and ultimately locally change. So 88% said that there was a preference for small single-family houses.